Good day. In this day, I'm going to talk about three major changes in job interviews when it comes to expectations when compared to 10 years ago. And it's going to be pretty hands-on advice with actionable insight. Okay, so the number one thing I want to talk about here is that nowadays, fewer candidates can answer questions around conflict and teamwork efficiently. Okay, why would this be the case in the age of AI, so to speak, or in the age of digital and remote work? Well, precisely because remote work primarily favors individualism. Okay, and since many people work remotely, they will struggle answering questions around working in teams and dealing with conflict, right? Now, what's the fix here? Well, the fix, if you have this problem, would be to, maybe look around the corner and see if you can find something interesting from your experience, but it may not be as straightforward if you simply don't have experience with handling conflict and working in teams. So you might want to consider literally getting a job, a face-to-face and on-site job, to build on those skills. In my experience, there's more than a few candidates who would significantly improve their chances to pass interviews with FAANG companies if they use this intermediate step, right? And if you don't have this problem of answering questions around conflict, then I would encourage you to score well, to make your answers more memorable and ensure they remember you for your answer on this, right? You could also consider making your answers a bit longer. Okay? Longer answers, more convincing, without rambling, also tend to drive better interview outcomes. Okay. The second thing I like to talk about here would be insider info into job interviews and into companies will not make you land a job offer. Okay. Insider info and recommendations can be super efficient to pass screening rounds, but this is not the main thing in landing job offers. In fact, I recently had someone who contacted me, hired me as a coach on the reasoning they thought I was an insider into Netflix interview process, which it was never the case. Still, I'm happy that that person realized that this is not the main lever of success for their interview. So we prepared, I helped him to improve his performance, and the outcome was a good one, right? But you'll be surprised how many candidates are 100% convinced that insider info is existential for their interview success, simply because 10 years ago we were dealing with information was scarce, right? At Amazon, for instance, you had to pay thousands of dollars just to know the questions on the leadership principles. Nowadays there's an abundance of such questions, and the difference is being made, so the fix here would be to understand that the difference in job interviews is based on your ability to perform, right? So it's not about getting the interview questions in advance, but predicting them and giving very accurate answers. That's why in my training program I have some quizzes. Quizzes basically to test how you think about job interviews, even to spot behaviors in interview questions. And everyone says, oh, they're super easy and so on and so forth, but vast majority of people are 60% accurate, so you cannot have great expectations if you're only 60% right on these things. So think qualitatively. It's all about your ability to perform. It's not about information scarcity today, right? The third thing I like to talk about here over what's changed, what's evolved in job interviews from 10 years ago would be back in the day and today, there are trick interview questions, right? So there will always be trick questions, but they are evolving over the time. So if 10 years ago there were those questions, something on the lines, how many golf balls can you fit into a school bus, or how many times a day does the clock's hands overlap, these sort of things. Nowadays, there's still some trick questions, but the way those questions are developed is changing. Okay, and to give you a number of examples, there's a new interview question, relatively new interview question now. What's your 30, 60, or 90-day plan if you get the job? right? Or another trend would be, instead of asking you, tell me about a time when you did not get along with someone, they would ask you, how do you handle conflict? Okay, so they would open-end that question, or they would make it hypothetical. How would you handle conflict inside your team? And there's more innovative ways to answer trick questions in job interviews. For example, they could have a setup, so to speak. That by setup I mean an enumeration of questions. So basically, they would ask you an easy interview question: tell me about yourself, which you would answer because everyone prepares this. Then they would ask you another easy question, such as, okay, maybe what do you enjoy the most? And you could even go, hey, I enjoy my time with my family and stuff like that. So you would basically, they would make you feel super comfortable, and then they would ask you something on the lines of, okay, have you had any shortcomings as of recently? You are feeling very comfortable, you want to open up to your interviewer, and you would tell them something on the lines of, yes, I failed twice last year on some mission critical things with my assignments, right? So it's actually a true story of how I coach people not to open up too much for the purpose of job interest. So again, they would ask you something to make you feel comfortable, and then they will subtly ask you, tell me about the time when you failed. And then, because of the fact you will be super well-intentioned, you're in a very good mood, you would talk about something that's not to your advantage. Talking about how you failed twice last year on some mission-critical assignments would not be to your advantage. You could even argue that, hey, why speak about 2 failures? Only one would be enough, and you'd probably not spend a ton of time talking about the learnings either, right? So this is the setup, right? It could also be as simple as, instead of asking you, tell me about the time when you failed, they would ask you something on lines, tell me about your most recent professional regret. Okay, this would be for more junior types of role, and the reasoning that you would think about what's your most recent, important, the most recent, even last week if possible, when in fact the question is about what's the best failure story you can share with me today, with the best learnings, and so on and so forth, right? So all in all, I feel, the expectations in job interviews are continuously evolving. There's also some external shifts, with the digital trend making people less likely to answer questions around dealing with conflict efficiently. The bar is always raising in these job interviews because previously we were dealing with information scarcity. Now it's information abundance. So it's up to you how you perform, how you choose the best information and improve it, use that information to your advantage. And of course, there will always be trick questions, and I've exemplified how they're evolving. So I hope you found this useful, and thank you very much for watching.